I'm here today with my good friend, Mr. Walter Clay Cox, Jr., a practicing attorney, a father, a husband, an avid golfer, and a veteran of World War II's Battle of the Bulge. Walter has just completed his autobiography, which is entitled, I Love My Angel. Walter, it's a terrific book.
Thank you.
With your permission, Walter, I would love to interview you today about your life, your book, and of course, your service during World War II.
You have my permission.
Very good.
Thank you.
Walter, you grew up in Lancaster, Kentucky. Can you describe what that was like for us?
Well, in Lancaster, there was only 2,000 people living there, and it was a quaint little town with a square, and the kids were allowed to roam the town and do about anything they wanted to and feel free, and there was no crime there. And so we were allowed to do about whatever we wanted to do. And kids can grow up really fast being free like that. Today's people, they don't get to go out away from their house. They don't get to roam the streets. They're scared of everything. The parents are protective, and it tells on the kids, I think. We grew up pretty fast, and we were allowed to go to the movies on Saturday from the time I was probably 6, 7 years old, go to the cowboy movies, go to they had a serial and a comedy, and it was just a wonderful experience back when we would go each Saturday to see what happened to the serial. It would always be somebody that'd jump off a cliff or get shot at or do something, and they would have a reason that he didn't get killed or whatever. It was fun. We had fun. I think that's it. Such a time in life when you should be having fun and free of all of the problems that grown-ups have. So I really recommend everybody live in a small town like that. Bring up their kids in a small town like that. I know it can't happen, but it surely would be nice. We had good education. I went to one school from the time I was 4 years old when I started in school in kindergarten. And I went through the same building from the basement to the first floor to the second floor. Graduated when I was 17 and went to UK when I was 17.
So Walter, you decided to become an attorney early in life. How did that happen?
Well, my father was quite a psychologist, I think, now looking back on it. One day he said, let's go for a ride. One Sunday morning it was. And so he took me down Maple Avenue in Lancaster, which is the best homes and the professional people. And every house we'd come to with big columns and nice looking home, he'd say, you know who lives here? And he'd give me the name of an attorney. And we went to 4 different houses, and every one of them were fine homes. One of them was my father's first cousin. He was county attorney. The other one was Green Clay Walker. The other one was H. Clay Kaufman. And you'll notice that every one of them had Clay in their name. And of course, I ended up with Clay in my name. So we ended up with 5 attorneys that had Clay in their name in a little town where they only had 7 attorneys, I think. Anyway, my father also then took me down a couple of streets, and we saw a couple of bungalows, no columns, small houses, 1 floor. You know who lives here? Our doctor. And then another doctor who was my grandmother's doctor, Dr. Edwards and Dr. Kennard. Then he turned to me and said, now, Walter Clay, that's what they called me back then, what do you want to be? So I thought about it a second, and I said, an attorney. It looks like they're making all the money. And so I never veered from that time on. When I entered school at UK, my first thing was to ask the advisor, what courses should I take to be an attorney? And we did everything that there was to do to put me in that direction.
Wonderful. Walter, in 1940, you were in college. What were the requirements of serving your country back then?
Well, at UK at that time, which was a land-grant college, every male had to take 2 years of ROTC. And as being an ROTC, you had to have a uniform. We had to wear a uniform to class. 2 times a week. And we also had to study military strategy and learn to shoot a gun, all the things that they could teach at college. In 2 years, you were released from ROTC unless you wanted to apply for advanced ROTC, which would put you in as an officer. You had 2 more years. And so you had to have grades, you had to have whatever is necessary, and I applied and got it. So I went into advanced ROTC, and as advanced ROTC, we had to be sworn in to the government as reserve soldiers. So we were not only studying to be lieutenants, but we were in the actual Army Reserve from then on. And so that's what everybody at UK had to do when they went to college there. Now the women didn't have to do that then. Maybe they would now, I don't know, but the men all had to do it.
Very interesting. So tell us about your summer of the summer of 1943 and basic training.
Well, we completed 1 year of advanced ROTC, and the government decided that they needed more officers and more men. I guess they knew the Battle of the Bulge was coming, or D-Day, and so they called us up to active duty from the reserve and sent us in the spring of 43 to basic training for 17 weeks. That was at Camp Wolters, Texas, for me. Some of the others went some places. You could join the Air Force, or you could join the Navy, or you could join some other branches. But what we were in the UK was infantry. And so not knowing what the infantry was, I didn't go anywhere else. The summer of 43 was the hottest, bad time I've ever been. It was dry all summer, no rain. The dust was about a foot thick, and we had no air conditioning. We had no cold water. We just about smothered at night. We'd sleep on top of the sheets and put Mexicana powder on us because we were broken out with heat rash. And it was just a horrible summer. But at the end of the summer, when we finished, all the men who were fat when they came in were then muscle. And all the men who were thin who came in were all muscle. And so we were all really in great shape. And I'll tell you what, I was already in good shape, and so I could outrun almost everybody in the whole company, and I never fell out on a march, and I felt like I could run the obstacle course as fast or faster than anybody else.
Sounds like it made a good man of you then. So Walter, when did you graduate from officer training in Fort Benning, Georgia?
Well, after basic training, they didn't have enough room at infantry school, so they sent us all back to UK. So we came back to UK, and we trained the ASTP boys who were being retained in college and not drafted because they were mentally better than anybody else, and they wanted those people to survive the war. That's what they needed later. And so we were training them until spring of 44, and they then took us to Officer Candidate School in Fort Benning, Georgia. And so for another 18 or 19 weeks, whatever it was, we trained at the training school in Fort Benning, Georgia, to be a second lieutenant. And that summer was not bad. After having been in Camp Wolters, Texas, it was a cakewalk. And so we had no problem getting through that, and I graduated August 8th of 1944. Went in as a private, put my bars on my collar, saluted me, and when I walked out of the big auditorium, all the privates outside were all saluting me. So boy, did I change. I am now being recognized as an officer. And then that night we go down to the bar, or we go somewhere where the generals and the majors and everybody, and I could sit right beside them and talk with them, whereas before, well, you could never talk with any officers. So I really was elevated. It was one of the major things that changed my life.
When you were training your platoon, which is Company E, Regiment 274 of the 70th Division, what were the highlights of that for you?
Well, after graduating, they sent me to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and I had to be a platoon leader over 40 men, and I was supposed to train them to be good soldiers, to kill the Germans or capture them, and to keep from being killed. So we trained on every weapon that their army had that they would let us train on. Small weapons, anywhere from a tank destroyer, a bazooka, or M1 rifle, or machine guns, or anything that we had to shoot at the enemy. And I trained them so that they knew it in not only at daytime, but at night. They knew everything about every rifle, and they could take it apart, put it back together in the dark. They could do anything with any weapon that we had. And my whole idea to impart to them was that they were to protect themselves and do everything to destroy the Germans when we got there.
Walter, can you describe when you arrived in Marseille, France in early December 1944 with your regiment?
After we trained there at Fort Leonard Wood, I guess 1st of November, we got orders to go to overseas. And we were told we didn't know where we were going. We were not told we were leaving, and that's it. Supposedly, they're spies in the United States, and they would tell the Germans we were coming. And we would be on a boat, and they might torpedo the boat. So we went to Boston, Camp Miles Standish, they called it. And so we got on a boat there, the Mariposa, which was a captured Italian luxury liner. And we had a whole regiment of about 3,000 men. And then we had another contingent of nurses. About 1,000 nurses were on board. That was interesting too. Anyway, we went over it fast. Supposedly the submarines couldn't keep up with us, so we didn't have anybody with us. We went over as a single ship. Arrived in Marseille about I think the 10th of December, 1944, and we were taken. I guess we walked from the dock clear up on top of a hill where they said to spread your tents, and we were going to be there for whatever it took to get us a train to take us to the front. And so our kitchen put up a tent. We had a kitchen out there, and we tried to keep from washing away because it was raining. And we'd build a little trench around the outside of the little pup tents for the water to run around the outside. And then sometime it rained too hard, and it would come in and get us all wet. It was pretty miserable, I have to say. It was cold, and it was a miserable time. So we were almost glad to get in the 40 and 8 trains heading to the front. I guess they did it that way on purpose.
Sure. Now, describe to me, you had to have 40 men in a single train car to bring you to the front lines. Can you describe how did 40 men survive for a week in a train car?
Well, you already heard the word 40 and 8. That's what this freight car was. They said it would hold 8 horses and 40 men. So they called them 40 and 8s. But with 40 men in that little rail car, you couldn't all lie down at the same time. So I would have to arrange so one squad would be sitting up, one would be lying down and sleeping, and the other one maybe half standing. It was really miserable. And trying to eat that many men in that cramped place, and of course we were just eating rations that were dry and didn't need any cooking or anything like that. We were probably 7 to 10 days from the time we left. As I think we left on maybe the 14th and didn't arrive till 24th, so I guess it was 10 days. We couldn't go in the daytime because the Germans had planes that would strafe the trains. And so we would stop during the day and forests where they couldn't see us, or in tunnels. And at night, then the train would run. Completely blackout. I don't know, I guess if something got in front of the train, well, they would be hit. They wouldn't go too fast, of course. It took a long time to get from Marseille up to Strasbourg, France, which is right on the German border. Strasbourg has been overrun by the French and Germans over the past centuries many times. So it belonged to both over a period of time, probably 10 times. Lots of Germans there.
Now, you arrived there on the 24th of December. Tell us how you spent Christmas in 1944.
Well, the night, Christmas Eve, we walked 8 miles to the front line in the snow about 2 feet deep, carrying everything we had, our backpack, guns, ammunition, the whole works. Always afraid, of course, that the Germans could come across and encounter us. But we followed the leader, and all we went. But we got there about 1 o'clock, from 8 o'clock in the morning, at night. And they had some places there, the old abandoned factories, where we could go inside and get out of the snow and sleep until morning. Lo and behold, on Sunday morning, Christmas Day, sunshine came out. Beautiful day. My angel made that, I'm sure. During the day, they brought up the kitchens, and we had turkey dinner, and we had a wonderful day. They brought up our mail. They brought up a lot of packages that our relatives had sent us, and so we had a pretty good day. We wandered around in the town. The little church held about 40 men, and so it took all day long for everybody to hold services for their platoon in the churches, and we did that all day long. But one of the major things that happened that I never forget was the planes began flying. Up until then, the Battle of the Bulge started on the 16th of December, and it was up in Malmedy, up north, and of course it was snowing and cloudy, and the planes couldn't see through the clouds to see where to put their bombs, so they all stayed on the ground. So here the sun came out, and here came the planes. And they say, afterwards I found out, there were 2,000 of them at one time. And the noise from the motors of a B-17 or a B-24, whatever it was just unbelievable. And we'd watch these planes go over. They'd go into Germany, and they would drop their bombs, and our land that we were standing on in this town of Buschweiler would shake just like an earthquake. I can still feel that tremor, And we were wondering how in the world anybody could live going through all that with the bombs of 2,000 planes dropping on them. Anyway, that was Christmas Day.
The German line was called the Siegfried defense line. It was just on the other side of the Rhine. What experiences took place getting to that? Well,
the French had what they called the Maginot Line on our side of the Rhine River. So we occupied the Maginot Line, and in addition to that, dug foxholes and stayed in those. But we could look across the Rhine River and see the Germans wandering around. It was a long distance, but every once in a while they'd take a pot shot at us, and we'd take a pot shot at them, but I don't think we ever hit. But anyway, it was a long distance. But that's all that went on, really. We had nothing to do but watch, make sure they weren't coming across. And for the next 5 days, until January the 1st, we were just in defense. All we did was make sure that they weren't coming across the river, and we weren't going across at that point, so all we did was stay in the Maginot Line, which is big bunkers that you could look out slits and put your guns out there, shoot. But that was relatively calm. Actually, my job was not to occupy that. I was in a Jeep driving up and down behind the line. I had a driver, and we had two of us with guns sitting in the back seat. in case the Germans did filter through and we were supposed to stop them. So that went on all up until January the 1st.
In your book, you describe having to truck a battalion to a town behind the American lines to fight Germans. Tell us about that.
Well, the Germans did infiltrate through at a different spot where we were. And they, since there was snow on the ground, they wore white coats over their uniforms. They were long coats that went all the way down to the ground, and it'd be hard to spot. They went one by one, according to the Germans, who later told us. That's an interesting story, too. We met up with the Germans who were the ones who occupied this town back behind the line. Anyway, they infiltrated through. They went into Wingen-sur-Moda, and that was a railhead town with all our supplies about 16 miles behind the line. And they went in about 2 o'clock and went in all the billets, and people were asleep, and they took all the men, captured them all, put them all in a little church in that town, about 250 of them who were in that town. Now, the reason they wanted to get that town was because it was a railhead and because they had all the ammunition and the food and everything that was our supplies. And they were supposed to have backup, but they called on our battalion to come off the front line. That was pretty interesting. Here they put us down there to defend, and now they're taking us out. So they put us all in trucks. There would be maybe 20 in each truck, so there's a lot of trucks. You talk about 1,000 men. And we followed the trail back through the mountains all the way up to the little town close to Wingen. We stopped there after going through the snow, and my truck that I was in the front seat, sometimes we'd get lost because we'd sleep. It was 2 or 3 o'clock, and my driver and I would both go to sleep. So I'd have to get out of the truck and go see where the tire went, and so we'd know where to go. Anyway, we finally arrived there about 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock. I don't know what time it was. And they told us to get a little sleep because we were going to attack at 7 o'clock. And they told us, there was just a few people in the town, not many. Later on, found there was 700 there. Mm. And they were seasoned SS troopers brought down from Norway, where they'd been fighting up there for 2 years. So they were tough eggs, older men. So we, at 7 o'clock in the morning, we went down to the edge of the woods leading into the town and started our attack. And one German stuck a white flag out of a window, and one of our men, on another platoon, not my men, I wouldn't have let him gotten up, but he got up. Why in the world he would do that and think they were going to give up? Well, that's crazy. And they shot him, killed him right there. From then on, I don't think we took any prisoners. But anyway, that's another story. We shot back and forth all day long, and a few people got into a few of the houses, but we ran up against some great defense there. They were shooting a lot, so we didn't do much that day. But the next day, we got up early and we went in, and I captured the first house in the town, and then people would come to that house, and then they would go on to the next houses. So I did pretty good by getting in first. I get to stay in the house. My men, at night, there was a Jeep that came down beside the house, and we knew it was an American Jeep the way they sounded. You could tell that even though it was dark. And the Germans opened up on the Jeep, and the guys bailed out of the Jeep on both sides of the road. And one of them came to the door, and we let him in, and he had his hand a grenade that he'd pulled the pin already, which means it would explode if you let go of it. And he didn't know what to do, and he didn't know where to put it, so I took the grenade out of his hand carefully and wrapped a tape around it and threw it out the window. The next day, we found one guy who never did come to the house, and he was in the ditch, stayed in the ditch all night. I thought he'd freeze to death because it was awful cold, but he wasn't. He was okay. And we found out later that he became president of our association, Orville Ellis. Never forget him. Anyway, the whole battalion then converged in the town, and we were fighting. A lot of people getting killed, both sides. And finally at night came the third day, and the guys came to me and said, my sergeant said, "There's a cow coming up the road." "Oh, don't tell me about a cow coming up the road. There's somebody else behind him. You get that cow." So they killed the cow, and there were the guys behind them, and they got them too. So we accomplished our mission there, and that was the last day that the Germans stayed in town. We either captured them or they took back to Germany one by one. And so we didn't have anybody left, but they assigned my platoon to go through every house and every place in the whole town to rout out any stragglers that might stay behind. And we did that. And during the onslaught, one of my best friends stuck his head out the window and was shot right in the forehead. And I was right behind him, but I didn't get shot, thank God, my angel. Anyway, after I was cleaning up in this town, at the end of the street where this lieutenant was killed, Lieutenant Wayne Mesher was his name, I found a rocking chair sitting in front of a window in a house, and beside him was all these spent shells. There must have been 200 or 300 there where he'd been shooting everybody. And of course he was shooting at the officers mainly, because the officers were directing the troops to what to do, and if you killed an officer, well, that would disrupt everything. And the sniper wouldn't shoot a lot, he would just shoot every now and then because he didn't want anybody to know where he was. However, we knew that was where he was sitting in a rocking chair shooting people. And he shot my friend, and then he shot another first lieutenant, killed him, and then he shot a captain 3 times, Captain Davenport. and he was lucky. He got shot through the cheek and on the shoulder and the hip. And he wouldn't go back, and they finally told him he was going back. He had to go back, but he was a tough egg. He recovered and came back and became a company commander in another fight. So he stayed alive for a long time.
It was quite the battle, Walter, it sounds like. And so tell me, how did you come to get the presidential citation?
Well, we stopped the onslaught. According to the Germans later, they wrote a book about Wingen. We wrote books about Wingen and all, and we met with these SS troopers in 1977 when we went back to tour our battleground. And they told us that their mission was to come through up in Malmedy and come through at Strasbourg and meet in Paris and encircle all of our troops, which would have been thousands and thousands of troops. But we stopped them in Wingen, and that was the reason for the presidential citation. When you can stop 700 SS troopers from going through, you've accomplished the mission. So that's why they gave us a presidential citation. By the way, the worst thing after cleaning up the town, the worst thing was that the dead wagon came to pick up all the dead. And I'll never forget, they had cattle sides like you'd put cattle in trucks, and they took the bodies and stacked them up just like you would logs. And it was I never get that out of my mind, how those bodies were grotesque because it was under 30 degrees and they were frozen, and they were in every shape. They couldn't straighten them out. They were in every shape and they were entangled, and it's embedded in my brain what they look like. You don't want to ever see anything like that.
No, God forbid. For those of us who haven't had to fight a theater of war, we've been very lucky. Walter, the title of your book is I Love My Angel. Why did you really write the book?
Well, when I went to church one time, the priest said, everyone is awarded an angel when they're born. Well, I had never really heard that. The Baptists didn't say that. I guess maybe it was true, but I don't know why they never did say it, but they did. Anyway, I got to thinking about my angel. I said, boy, it's been overworked. And through combat, through almost drowning 2 times, car overturning and never hurting me, And the many times I talk about in my book about how my angel saved my life, and not only that, but my children and other friends and people like that. I think that the prayer that we all gave when we were in combat, and everybody prayed a lot, that's for sure. I taught my men to make sure they prayed so that they would stay alive. And they all did. I know they did. And the power of prayer is something that I believe, and I know that it works. So anyway, this book reflected all of the reasons that I've never been in the hospital, I've never been shot, I've never been hurt, never broken a bone, never had any reason to never had any bad illness. So you know I've got an angel. So what did I do? I said, I love my angel, I really do. And I hope they keep on overworking.
Would you think your angel helps you play golf today?
Once in a while, I think so. About 2 months ago, I was playing at the UK club, and the first hole, I was out about 75 yards, and I took a 9-iron and chipped it in the hole. And, you know, I hadn't done that in a long time, so I made a birdie on that hole. I was short. Of course, I don't hit it very long anymore. And then I played with the Better Business Bureau just about 3 weeks ago, and I was out to the Kentucky Club out here on Harrisburg Road. And out of the 4 of us, it was scramble. I was on the green in number 8, and I was about 20 feet away from the hole, and they all said, well, you make your putt and you'll make your own birdie. And I did. And so I know my angel, that ball went up to the right of the hole, and I thought, well, I missed it, sure. And all at once it turned and went right in the hole. So, you know, bound to have a little assist from my angel. And there's just a million things that I can think of that why my angel took care of me and is taking care of me.
Still doing it. Walter, I do need to remember that you were also called up for duty in Korea. Why were you called up for duty in Korea?
Well, back in World War II, it didn't need lawyers. In fact, one of the lawyers from the UK was made a colonel in charge of a battalion. And he said, don't you need a lawyer? And they said, oh, we don't need lawyers. So they passed a law that everybody had to be represented by a lawyer. The judge had to be a lawyer. And so they called up about 100,000 lawyers from the reserve. One lawyer, there's 2 of us in Lancaster. Now we only had 7 lawyers, and they called 2 of us in the same orders, Gilbert Wilson and myself. So I was elected judge in 1948 when Dewey and Truman ran for president, and I thought Truman had lost, and lo and behold, the next morning I wake up and he's won. They called me from the courthouse and said, you come up and be sworn in. You're now a judge. I didn't run for judge. What do you mean? I'm not a judge. They said, no, your friends from the VFW and the American Legion all wrote you in. And so now you're elected judge. You got the most votes. So I was a judge, and when they called me up, I tried to get out of it by writing to my senator and representatives and everybody, but I was unsuccessful. That's the one time my angel failed me. I guess they needed me more than he thought I needed. So I had to go to Korea, so they sent me to Fort Knox. Then I had to go to Washington, D.C. and go to 6 weeks school to learn all about court-martials and all that. Then I came back to Fort Knox, and I had orders to go to Korea. And Christmas of 51, Christmas of 51, I went to Chicago, got on the Hiawatha, and went all the way to Seattle, Washington, from Seattle to Japan. And in Japan, they called me down to the office and said, Captain Cox, you are been selected to be promoted to major. All you have to do is sign up for 3 years. We won't send you to Korea. We'll keep you here in Japan. You can bring your wife and daughter, which I had at that time. And I said, thank you very much, but I'm going back to law practice. I only got to serve 7 more months, so send me on. So they sent me to Korea. I went up to Daegu on a train, and then the colonel there was the colonel at Fort Knox, and I was the only one who had ever been in the front line and had a combat infantryman's badge. And so he sent me all the way back to Poussin. He said, I'm going to get you out of this combat zone. And he sent me to Poussin. And I was Court of Appeals for court-martials. I had to review all of the court-martials while I was there. But it wasn't hard at all. It was office duty. And so it was just putting in time. And as soon as I put in my time, they sent me back home. And I decided then I'd go to Lexington instead of Lancaster. I've been practicing here ever since.
You've been practicing ever since. And you've had a long and very interesting career as an attorney. Walter, this has been a wonderfully interesting conversation. You're a wonderfully interesting man. And we want to thank you for your fantastic service. We're glad your angel has been so good to you, and your book is a terrific read, and I know many, many people will enjoy reading it. Would you have any parting comments that you'd like to?
Well, you know, December the 16th will be the 70th year of the Battle of the Bulge. And we're getting to the point where all the people who were there are going to be gone pretty soon. All my friends are all gone already, and at age 92 and on from there on, well, there'll be less. We have an association of our division, and we came here in 1977 for our convention, and we had 900. Last year they met at Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they had 60. So either they're gone or they can't travel. And so they're probably the last one we'll ever have. So I thought it was very appropriate to try to put in writing something that frontline warrior. You know, out of 16 million people in World War II that were drafted and taken in, or however it got there, there was only approximately 1 million actually on the front line. Now, there were a lot of killed in World War II that weren't on the front line. They were behind the lines, they were whatever. People get accidentally killed. Ships got sunk. I guess they were on the front line, but they weren't looking at the enemy. Those that were in the infantry, actually, the Marines and the infantrymen facing, shooting at each other, there was only about 1 million out of 16 million that actually were on the front line. And so I'm one of the elite group that were there in person and still survived without a shot, without anything at all. I never had a thing. They were close to me. One time a mortar shell hit in front of me about 20 feet, and I can still see it with the fin sticking up. It went into the mud or whatever and didn't go off. So I wouldn't be sitting here if it had gone off. So
your angel at work again.
The angel kept that mortar shell from going off, I'm sure. I had one time I was going down the hill going into Sterling Wendell before you get to Saarbrücken, where we crossed the Saar River, and I was in the lead, and all at once a shell cracked over my head so close that I know what they sound like when they're getting close, and I know it just barely missed me, and I fell down and got behind a rock, so I knew they wouldn't shoot me again, and I yelled at the guys to be sure they watch out for that sniper. So they all began shooting. I don't know whether they got anything or not, but another time my angel deflected the shell, I'm sure. I wouldn't go through it again for all the money in the world, but I wouldn't take it out of my brain because it's embedded there, and it made me grow up real quick from age 20 to 22. My men were all 18, 19-year-old men, and they called me the old man at 22. And that's what I was in the Battle of I was just turned 22 when Wingen we went into Wingen. Grew up quick in combat.
It's quite a story, Walter, and we're glad you documented it for everybody. It's a great read. You're a role model for all of us. But you're 92 years young, and so I have to ask you this. What's your secret for staying so young? Because you're a young man.
They asked me at church that, and I said, keep your weight that you had when you were 21. You should also eat the right food that they tell you to eat, the vegetables, many of those, all of the vitamins that you can put in your side of you that doesn't make you sick, and always try to keep busy. Never retire. The people that have retired that I was partners with in my old law firm are all gone. So keep busy. Keep busy. Read everything you can read, and do all of the exercises and walking that you can possibly do. And that'll keep your weight down. That first one then will take care of itself. At least that's what's happened to me. So all I can do is recommend what happened to me. Of course, I had good genes too. I went to see my grandmother at age 16, and she was 95 years old, sitting on a little clapboard house on the front porch, smoking a corncob pipe. Very small, though. Probably we didn't weigh 100 pounds. And she lived another 2 or 3 years after that. So I do have some genes, I guess. That helps a lot, too.
Good. That means you've got a ways to go. Walter.
Yes.
It's
I
been
told
a pleasure.
everybody I'm going to rent Rupp Arena when I have 100.
100.
So we'll have a lot of people there.
I look forward to it. I hope I can be invited. Walter, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you very much, Pete.
Wonderful.
Great.
Have a great day.